So, Boston, Massachusetts, founded in 1630 by the Puritans. Pretty nice city by American standards. Lots of nice history. Now I want you all to imagine if we placed a thermonuclear weapon inside the metropolitan area. Fallout 4, published by Bethesda in 2015 for, just a handful of consoles. Oh yeah, this game right here is my favorite video game of all time. Figured I should set expectations right away, right? Now, for those of you who are not very familiar with the Fallout series, let me enlighten you. Taking place in a post-nuclear Armageddon United States, the Fallout series says, what if we take the vibe of post-World War II Americana, sprinkle in a bit of commentary about aggressive nationalism, add a dash of dark humor as well as some retro-futurism, and put it in the post-apocalypse. Now, unlike most games I grew up with, I didn't discover Fallout 4 by having it bought for me or having a friend introduce it to me. No, instead the culprit in this instance was the World Wide Web, specifically YouTubers, which made the game look incredibly fun. And combining that with an issue of Game Informer, which rated the game very favorably, I decided to buy the game on PC in early 2016, and I quickly fell in love with it. Yeah, I know that actually admitting that I read a physical magazine like 10 years ago makes me seem really old, but I swear, I'm hipping up with the times, yo. Now, for a bit of context, this wasn't the first open world game that I had ever played. Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag, and Red Faction Guerrilla hold that distinction. However, Fallout 4 was the first open world game that I played that encouraged the player to go investigate the things that they saw off in the distance, which, needless to say, that really clicked with me. Whether I was waiting to get home from school to play more of the game, only for my original save file to get corrupted, posting videos on YouTube of me playing the game, collecting a bunch of random merchandise because, economic stimulation and all that, I guess, or even getting hyped about the DLC in the summer of 2016, there are various reasons I love Fallout 4 as much as I do, and continue to think that it is a masterpiece. A technically unstable masterpiece full of missed opportunities, sure, but a masterpiece nonetheless. So, without any further ado, let us begin this rather lengthy love letter to my favorite game of all time. Starting now. So, beginning a new game, we find ourselves in the year 2077 with a cutscene which brings us up to speed on the state of the world. TLDR, Communist China invaded Alaska for their natural resources, which everyone was kind of running out of at the time, and now the world is on the edge of nuclear war. After that, we're introduced to our playable characters, Nate, who's an Alaska veteran, or Nora, who's a lawyer, both of which we get to customize, which can lead to some interesting results, I guess? Oh, who am I kidding? That's horrifying. Anyway, Nate and Nora live with their newborn son Sean and their robot butler Codsworth in the town of Sanctuary Hills, a nice suburban community outside the city of Boston in what the Fallout universe calls the Commonwealth. Anyway, we begin playing through a peaceful middle-class morning until we hear a knock at the door, which happens to be a salesman for the company Vault-Tec. Who's Vault-Tec? Well, Vault-Tec is a government contractor who builds, get this, vaults, which are just highly advanced Fallout shelters. Anyway, due to Nate's military service, or I suppose now Luigi Parmesan's military service, his family gets a spot in the local vault. Vault 111. So we sign up for the vault, and right on cue, nuclear war breaks out as we hurry to the vault and narrowly avoid becoming a TV dinner as the world gets blown to smithereens. Once in the vault, you and your family are told to enter a decontamination pod, but you actually believed that? No, they're just putting you on ice for the next 210 years. So, a bit of a spoiler here, Vault-Tec is really screwed up, and they just use the vaults to conduct experiments. And this one here is one of the least messed up experiments they do, so good for us, I guess. Anyway, we briefly get thawed out long enough to see our spouse getting shot by a mysterious man and Sean being kidnapped, and then we get frozen again, only to be thawed out again a little while later and escape the vault. But not before collecting this, a Pip-Boy. In-universe, it's a retro-futuristic version of a smartwatch, but for gameplay, it's how you manage your inventory. Why am I discussing gameplay now? I don't know. Anyway, upon exiting the vault, we are hit with one of the coolest reveals in video games as we make our way to the ruins of Sanctuary, only to find our robot butler Codsworth still trying to maintain our house. Yeah, you might want to find a new career path, buddy. So after going on a little tour of town with Codsworth, he points us in the direction of the town of Concord, which he says might have information on the whereabouts of Sean. Wait a minute, find a kidnapped kid? I don't even know how to play the game, I hear you say, with a hint of questioning every decision that led you up to this point in your life. Alright, so the core of Fallout 4's gameplay, and the entire franchise's gameplay, I suppose, revolves around this, the special system. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, I slightly envy you, but special is actually an acronym standing for strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck. Each attribute affects how well you can perform certain tasks within the game depending on how you distributed your points when creating your character. Going down the list, strength affects how much you can carry as well as your melee damage, perception determines how well you can hit your targets in VATS, which I haven't explained yet. VATS, or the Vault-Tec Assisted Targeting System, allows you to specifically target certain enemy body parts while also giving you a percentage based on how likely you are to hit each limb. This, at least in my eyes, adds some much-needed variety to the combat, and on occasion leads to some pretty funny moments, because again, on a technical level, Fallout 4 is not well put together. Okay, tangent over, back to the special list. Endurance affects both your health and your action points, which affects how long you can sprint, as well as how many actions you get while in VATS. Charisma affects how well you can talk to people, which allows you to convince people, get more information, or my favorite, just extort them. Intelligence influences how fast you level up. Agility affects your stealth as well as your action point refresh rate. And finally, luck, which affects how frequently you get critical hits. Now, although what I just said was the most impactful part of the special system, your base stats are only one piece of the puzzle, as it also impacts what perks you can unlock. Now you see, every level up you get one perk point, which you can either spend on unlocking a new perk or increasing your special stats. And side note, Fallout 4 doesn't have a level cap, so, have fun with that, completionists. In total, there are 70 perks with multiple levels, and the availability of these perks is dependent on your special stats. For example, say you want the Intimidation perk. Well, you're going to have 10 points, aka the max amount of points you can have, in Charisma before you can unlock it. Some of these perks are incredibly cool, such as Mysterious Stranger, which unlocks a chance for the aptly named Mysterious Stranger to appear while in VATS and one-shot an enemy. The Cannibalism perk is also here because, it's the post-apocalypse, it's not illegal anymore. Cap Collector is also here, which allows you to buy for less and sell for more, overall allowing you to save on bottle caps, which, just so everyone knows, is the currency of the Wasteland in the Fallout universe. Now, unlike the perks I just mentioned, some are pretty essential to the gameplay, such as Locksmith, which allows you to pick locks of varying quality, as well as Hacker, which does the same thing but for terminals. And then looking at the complete other side of the spectrum, there are some perks that are completely pointless, like Vans, which leads you to your objective despite the compass on the bottom of your screen already doing that. This perk is literally so bad that despite me having put thousands of hours into this game across multiple platforms, across multiple years, I have never and will never invest in it. Full stop. Now, yeah, I know, all this sounds pretty complicated, so instead, let's move away from the background gameplay stuff and discuss the more immediately obvious gameplay. And as you can likely tell, Fallout 4 is an action RPG, meaning that combat plays a major role within the game. And speaking of said combat, it's split up into 5 major weapon classes, being pistols and rifles, which are pretty self-explanatory, the heavy weapons, which can range from a minigun all the way up to a Fat Man, which is just a catapult for mini-nukes, which yes, that's as cool as it sounds. And also, side note, the heavy weapons category can move into some more unconventional areas, such as the junk jet, which kills enemies with whatever pieces of junk you load into it, like, I don't know, a hairbrush. We also have energy weapons, which includes both laser and plasma guns. And finally, we have melee weapons, which can be your basic beating stick or whatever else can snuff the life out of a living being. All these weapons can be found throughout the Commonwealth, either on the corpses of enemies or bought from vendors, with each and every one having the ability to be upgraded with new parts and modifications at a workbench. However, if you want something a little different, why not try out the legendary weapons of Fallout 4? Legendary weapons are your basic weapons, but with a twist. They have a special effect attached to them, which makes them more powerful. With around 50 of these effects able to be found on items which spawn randomly on the corpses of legendary enemies, you can get something like a submachine gun that gets stronger the more strung out you are. Let's just be honest with ourselves here. In all likelihood, you're just gonna get a random piece of armor that you couldn't care less about. Alright then, that sounds painful and inconsistent. Is there a way to guarantee the legendary effect that I want is actually on a gun that doesn't suck? Well, kinda. And this is due to the unique weapons which can be found throughout the map, bought from certain vendors or even given as quest rewards. These unique weapons can range from alright to by far the best gun in the game. Like, there's no competition. Overseer's Guardian is just that good. But alright, now that we're armed to the teeth, let's get some armor. But not just any old dainty armor. I want a real set of armor. Yeah, that'll do it. This beauty is Power Armor, your own personal Iron Man suit. Coming in 5 flavors, with each being better than the last, alongside a handful of unique variants, this hulking metal suit increases your damage resistance significantly, as well as your rad resistance, which we'll get into in a minute. Now, you may think Power Armor sounds pretty overpowered, and, well, that's kind of the point of it. I mean, just look at it. But Fallout 4 balances Power Armor out by first adding armor durability to all 5 pieces of Power Armor, which for some reason Fallout 4 removed durability for all normal armor and weapons, but they kept it for Power Armor, so I mean, hey, that's there. And their second way to balance out Power Armor is by forcing you to continuously scavenge for fusion cores in order to power your suit. Your fusion core runs out, well, it'll just swap out for the next one. But if you run out of fusion cores, well, have fun up the creek, I guess. Anyway, what was it that I was going to circle back to again? Oh yeah, radiation. So given that you're hanging out in a world ravaged by nuclear war, there are a lot of rads just laying around. Radiation is a major environmental hazard of the world because the more rads you take, the less health you're able to restore with healing supplies. But don't worry, this isn't permanent, because if you visit a doctor, they're able to get rid of your rads, and if you're out in the middle of Timbuktu with no doctor in sight, then you're able to use a drug called Radaway to remove your radiation. Alright, that's pretty cool. Guns, power armor, radiation, cool. But I want a real challenge. Well, okie dokie then, hypothetical adrenaline junkie in my mind, I want to introduce you to Survival Mode. Functioning as the hardest difficulty mode in Fallout 4, Survival Mode does a great number of things, including disabling fast travel, adding in thirst and hunger, forcing you to sleep in order to save your game, as well as just making enemies all around more deadly. Disclaimer, this isn't a mode for the faint of heart, but if you're looking for a new challenge, hey, Survival Mode might be for you. Alright, then I think that fully covers Fallout 4's gameplay. Where were we in the story again? We only just left Sanctuary. Oh good god, we might need an intermission here. This is going to take a while. So arriving in Concord, we don't find our kidnapper amigo, no. Instead, we find a group of settlers trapped in the Museum of Freedom by raiders, led by Preston Garvey, who is currently fighting the irrepressible urge to tell us about how the settlements of the Commonwealth need our help. Hold your horses, that joke will make more sense in a bit. Anyway, we help Preston out of his pickle by getting a suit of power armor and killing a Deathclaw, and then we're directed to head towards the great green jewel of the Commonwealth, Diamond City, built out of the ruins of Fenway Park. So we head there, meet the local reporter named Piper, and get pointed in the direction of the local detective, Nick Valentine, who may be able to help find Sean. And it's while we're looking around for the detective agency that we start hearing talk of a mysterious boogeyman called the Institute. A group of mad scientists who kidnap people and replace them with near-perfect android replicas called synths, with the older models being used to terrorize the region. The fear of your friends and family being scooped up in the middle of the night and replaced has driven not only Diamond City, but the entire Commonwealth into a paranoid frenzy, which can be seen as we stumble into an active standoff where a man has pulled a gun on his own brother, believing him to be a synth. Oh, hey, that's a solution. Anyway, we finally stumble into the Valentine Detective Agency, only to find that, oh no, Nick's gone missing. A new vault discovered and several dozen fresh corpses later, we've saved Nick, who happens to be a synth. But don't worry, he's not one of the replace your best friend Leonardo Asiago kind, he's one of the prototypes who has the memories of pre-war cop kind. So anyway, we go back to the detective agency, describe Sean's kidnapper, and that old private eye immediately has a suspect. The grizzled mercenary Kellogg, who happens to have a house in town which we can search in order to find where he is.
Which, totes violates the 4th Amendment, bro.
And where he happens to be is the old army base Fort Hagen. So we go there, and Kellogg tells us they handed Sean over to the Institute. So, naturally, we wipe the cereal brand man off the face of this mortal plane. Woo! Problem solved!
People of the Commonwealth, do not interfere. Our intentions are peaceful. We are the Brotherhood of Steel.
Well, that's a little eccentric if you ask me, but alright, sure. Guess we have a new player in the Commonwealth. The Brotherhood of Steel. Neat. Wait a minute, who's the Brotherhood of Steel? Well, this chapter of the Brotherhood comes to us from 2008, back in Fallout 3, but the faction exists all over the wasteland. Set up at both the Boston airport and aboard their airship called the Pridwin, they like to hoard technologies they view normal people as too violent to possess it. Which is exactly why all of them use laser rifles and power armor, partly because that's cool and stuff, but also because they just have way too much of it laying around. Now see, they've come to the Commonwealth to fight the Institute, which they see as a potential threat to humanity due to the whole, kidnapping someone and replacing them with a sentient robot thing they have going on, which they also deeply despise. The synth part, not the kidnapping part, they're fairly indifferent on that part. I mean, for God's sake, they use child soldiers. Do you think they're morally just? So, alright. Technology knights and mad scientists. Cool. Are those the only two players in the Commonwealth? Nope! We also have the Railroad, which is a secret organization located underneath the Old North Church, who focus on liberating synths from the Institute and getting them out of the Commonwealth, because they view the Institute as enslaving the synths. We also have the Minutemen. Who are the Minutemen? Well, you, of course. You and Preston Garvey, but mostly you. Focusing on defending the citizens of the Commonwealth, the Minutemen are essentially just a militia, which isn't doing so hot when you find them because everyone except for Preston is dead. So, with Preston finally unable to keep his mouth shut, he belts out his famous catchphrase,
"I've gotten word about a settlement that's being threatened by raiders. I'll mark it on your map."
And just like that, you're thrust into the endless task of recruiting as many small settlements scattered around the map as you can to rebuild the Minutemen. Eventually, you rebuild them enough that they retake their original headquarters at the castle, real-life Fort Independence, and even build some artillery. I have done at least, 5 dozen of these Radiant quests here within the last couple weeks, and I am sick and tired of them. So you know what? Screw those pesky parental responsibilities. Let's talk about the open world. And man, let me tell ya, the Commonwealth is just such a fun place to explore. Why is that, you may ask? Well, there are quite a few reasons. First off is how much the world leans into the vibe that the game is going for. For instance, when you think of the United States in the 1950s, what do you think of? Coca-Cola? Well, we have Nuka-Cola, which is everywhere. Greaser subculture? Well, we have these cars that look like they're basically just pulled out of the Jetsons, as well as the Atom Cats, who are basically just power armor greasers. Music? Well, we have Diamond City Radio, and despite a good chunk of the songs being played on the radio being from the 1940s and even a handful from the 1930s, there are still quite a few from the 1950s, as well as a few from the 1960s, and even some original songs by everyone's favorite Wonder Woman actress, Linda Carter. And side note, Fallout as a series does a great job with their soundtracks, and is probably the single largest contributor to this older music remaining somewhat culturally relevant with the younger generations. I mean, prior to 2016, I had no idea who Bob Crosby was. Though, another reason the Commonwealth is so fun to explore comes down to the enemies that you can find throughout the world. Now yes, you get some of your more basic enemy types, such as raider gangs and the more sophisticated mercenaries of the Gunners, but you also have some more unique things that want to kill you. Such as super mutants, which are humans infected with a super soldier serum called the Forced Evolutionary Virus, which make them strong combatants, but also incredibly dumb with some notable exceptions. So basically it's just the Hulk with a gun. You can also on occasion find older super mutants who have evolved into super mutant behemoths, which, to be completely honest here, they look significantly more intimidating than they actually are. We also have ghouls, who are humans who have been exposed to near-lethal amounts of radiation, which for some reason made it so they no longer age. Now, despite their appearance and everyone else's attitude towards them suggesting that they're zombies or something akin to that, most of them are actually totally cool. Except for feral ghouls, you don't need to feel remorse when shooting them in the face. There are also quite a few animals out and about to keep your eyes on, such as the Deathclaw or Yaogwai, which would love nothing more than to rip out your jugular, so that's neat. And finally, we find ourselves taking a look at the various robots you can find throughout the Commonwealth, such as the Mr. Handy or Miss Nanny, who are your robot butlers, and usually pretty peaceful. Well, unless you're dealing with a Mr. Gutsy, those just have an unquenchable thirst for communist blood. We also have some other robots, such as the Protectrons, which are your jack-of-all-trades, the Sentry Bot, which are essentially tanks, and Assaultrons, which put the fear of God into me. But moving away from the things that want to kill you, let's talk about the people who want to help you. More importantly, the people who want you to help them. See, in every nook and cranny of the Commonwealth, you can find interesting characters who need help with something, leading you down the road known as Side Quest Boulevard. There are so many interesting characters and quests that you can stumble across while exploring the Commonwealth, which really develop it into the dark, yet humorous and slightly mysterious setting that I hold so dear. Breaking out the list of examples, we start off with Confidence Man, which sees us teaming up with the bartender of the Dugout Inn to help build the confidence of Travis Miles, who's the DJ over at Diamond City Radio. Now, how would one go about doing this, I hear you ask? Well, the 1-2 punch of staging a bar fight, getting Travis a girlfriend, and having a shootout in an old brewery, of course. Transforming him from a timid DJ to Travis Lonely Miles, the best DJ this side of the Charles. Walking a little further downtown, we can find ourselves dishing out vigilante justice on the streets of Good Neighbor during the Silver Shroud quest. Now see, this is Kent Connolly, a die-hard comic book fan who owns the Silver Shroud radio station, which plays reruns of the pre-war Silver Shroud radio drama. So naturally, Kent tasks you with becoming the vigilante superhero himself and make the Commonwealth a little bit safer. And initially, this goes over pretty well with you taking out criminals throughout the greater metro area. Well, that is until Kent gets himself kidnapped by raiders. So what's a heavily armed vigilante superhero with some heavily demented thoughts to do in this situation? Yeah, that felt right. Anyway, completely shifting gears and locations, we find ourselves mocking a child who got stuck in a fridge over 200 years ago. I'll be shocked if we get 10 cents out of this. Anyway, this is Billy the Fridge Kid, destroyer of ghoul lore and lost child extraordinaire, who wants us to help him find his parents in the ruins of Quincy. Now, I mean, you could be a good little Luigi and do exactly as Billy asks of you, or you could, you know, sell him into slavery. Yeah, man, I'm too much of a Yankee to take you up on that offer, but, I guess thanks anyway. Anyway, I think those 3 quests kind of highlight the archetypes you're going to find on Side Quest Boulevard. Fairly normal quest, the wacky yet still fairly grounded quest, and whatever the heck you want to call Billy's little conundrum. However, that's not all that Fallout 4's side quests have on offer. See, I've been saving my favorite side quest for last because it is a perfect example of the depths of wackiness that the Fallout series is willing to sink to, and somehow, it absolutely works. So, without any further ado, let me set the scene. You're chilling in your favorite Commonwealth bar having a drink when you're approached by a ghoul looking for a hired hand to help out his boss. So naturally, you say, sure, why not, and meet him in the strangely pristine Cabot house where you're introduced to Jack Cabot, a scientist who asks you to recover a mysterious serum that a gang of raiders stole from his heavily guarded facility at Parsons State Insane Asylum. Mad scientist, mysterious serum. Yeah, we're probably just recovering heroin, but who am I to judge? So anyway, we recover the serum, do some busy work, and then all that weirdness begins to unfurl as the raider gang attacks the asylum again. Now you see, these raiders are trying to free Jack's father Lorenzo, who found an ancient alien artifact in the Arabian desert back in 1894, an idea that probably has the conspiracy channel bolting to the writer's room. This artifact gave Lorenzo superhuman abilities, though it slowly made him more and more deranged, forcing Jack to lock his father up. However, by taking blood samples from Lorenzo, the Cabot family was able to create a serum which provided them with immortality. So apparently Jack isn't a heroin addict, he's just microdosing his dad's blood. That's not much better, to be completely honest. So now in this asylum basement with the raiders already a step ahead, you're left with 2 choices. Free Lorenzo, or kill him. What do you think we do with a 450-year-old deranged superhuman? Take him for an ice cream? No! We murder the superpowered loony like the real man with a stereotypical Italian name that we are! So I think I can say with confidence that around 25% of you guys are thinking that the ending to that quest was at least a little odd, to say the least. And you'd be absolutely correct with that. However, as I said before, it is a perfect example of the depths of wackiness the Fallout series reaches towards, and despite how out of place the Cabots may feel at a glance, Fallout 4 is absolutely no stranger to the inclusion of occult mysteries in its open world. Want proof? Well, look no further than the Dunwich Boars, where after clearing out a gang of raiders and entering the quarry, we begin getting hit with flashbacks to pre-war times, which culminate in a flashback of what appears to be a human sacrifice. And in addition to that really weird flashback, we can find a giant creepy statue at the bottom of the sinkhole that appears in the exact location where these human sacrifices took place. Another instance of the occult can be found in this pretty standard looking cave after reaching level 20. Now see, you'd think this cave would be pretty normal, but upon entering the cave, we come face to face with an alien, who we naturally shoot in the face, because I mean, come on, this is America. We don't negotiate with terrorists. But hey, since we've already begun dipping our toes into the marked and unmarked locations scattered around the Commonwealth, we may as well dive headfirst into the locations of Fallout 4. And don't fret, the occult locations aren't the only place which have stories attached to them. No, instead, pretty much every location, marked and unmarked on the map, has a unique story to tell, which can take numerous forms, such as the cruel experiments of the vaults, secret government bunkers, corporate drama, or just heartfelt stories of average people just trying to survive. And man, I'd love to talk about all the areas of Fallout 4 and discuss the stories they tell. However, I'm not a Fallout lore YouTuber, and I don't have the time nor ambition for that, so instead we'll just quickly go through some of my favorite areas in the Commonwealth. And hey, we might as well start with all three major towns found within the Commonwealth, those being Diamond City, Good Neighbor, and Bunker Hill. First up is Diamond City, which is built inside Fenway Park, as I already stated. It serves as your generic post-apocalyptic settlement, this time with a baseball shop, because, I mean, you're in a baseball stadium. Our second major settlement is Good Neighbor, which is centered around the old State House and serves as the more lawless settlement, which, might I add, explains the prevalence of fedoras and Tommy guns around town. And finally, our third major settlement is Bunker Hill, which, given its name, you'd expect to be centered around the Battle of Bunker Hill Monument, right? Well, for once, you're actually correct, and it serves as the hub for numerous traveling traders that you can find while out and about. It's also easily the most boring settlement out of the bunch, but that's neither here nor there. But alright, enough with that. Let's talk about some non-town-shaped interesting locations, like vaults. In total, we have 5 vaults to talk about, though we already went through Vault 111 and shot up Vault 114, so in reality we have more like 3 of them left. So we may as well start off with Vault 75, located underneath Malden Middle School. Can you guess what experiment was here? Well, if you said experimenting on children to create super soldiers, you've either played this game and not told me, or you have a future on the FBI's most wanted list. Next up is Vault 95, which housed both the world's largest AA meeting, as well as a stockpile of drugs and booze. Can you guess how that one ended? And finally, we have Vault 81, which, I think that's town-shaped. So, apparently we have a functional vault on our hands. Cool! Hope there isn't a secret portion of the vault that does creepy science experiments trying to find the cure to all diseases via mole rats. Anyway, that's all the vaults we can find in the Commonwealth, so let's move on to, oh my god, what is that? Well, that, my beloved member of the Peanut Gallery, is the USS Constitution. Like the ship from the War of 1812. Now with rocket boosters. An unrelenting thirst for communist blood. No questions? Great, what's next? Well, that moves us neatly along to what I like to call the Boston Icons, which, that's a pretty self-explanatory name for this category. We have sites such as the new and old State Houses, Freedom Trail, Bunker Hill, Old North Church, and my personal favorite, the Boston Common, as it has a pretty sick mini-boss named Swan who has messed me up one too many times. The one thing that bugs me about the Boston Common, the no end, is that they include the Robert Gold Shaw 54th Mass Memorial, but didn't model the thing properly. Like, why even include it in the first place if you're not going to add any detail? Because not everyone cares about this stuff as much as I do? Yeah, that sounds about right. Alright, enough about that stuff. Now for possibly the most interesting location in all of Fallout 4. The Glowing Sea. Consisting of the entire southeastern corner of the map, and then some, the Glowing Sea is the region of the Commonwealth hit with the most nuclear weapons, which gives it its signature high rad levels, which can spread to the rest of the region in the form of rad storms. And I'm going to be honest here, this place looks incredibly cool and has such high potential, but I'm mostly just hyping it up purely on vibes, because in reality, it's kind of lame to explore. See, most of the Glowing Sea is just, oh look, a building blown up by a nuclear bomb, can't get that anywhere else on the map. But there still are some locations that warrant visiting here. For example, Sentinel Site, which was a nuclear munitions disposal site, and likely the entire reason this area was hit as bad as it was. We also have the Crater of Adam, which was ground zero for that nuclear blast that we witnessed back in pre-war times. It is now currently inhabited by a cult known as the Children of Adam, who worship the radiation present in the area as a deity. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. The Children of Adam living here doesn't really make a whole lot of logical sense. But who cares? This location is still pretty rad. Yeah, this is Wild Die Alone. Okay, moving away from the massively underwhelming glowing sea, let's discuss another facet of these locations besides the stories they tell. And I think the only natural topic to move on to under these circumstances are the collectibles that Fallout 4 has on offer. Of which, we have two main collectibles which you can find throughout the Commonwealth. And we may as well start off with the Vault-Tec bobbleheads, which are scattered all throughout the map, with locations ranging from, oh, that's pretty easy to spot, all the way to, okay, Gravity, that's not very cool of ya. With 20 of these little guys defined, all pertaining to a specific stat, they're a pretty fun distraction, which do actually benefit you. How do they benefit you, I hear you ask? Well, each one of them you collect gives you a permanent buff. For example, the Perception bobblehead gives you +1 Perception, the Energy Weapons bobblehead gives you +25% critical damage with energy weapons, and so on and so forth. These buffs are cool and all, but let's be honest, the best thing about these bobbleheads is that they make for great display pieces for your shack. But hey, why only decorate our shack with bobbleheads when we can also decorate with our other main collectible, the magazines? In total, there are 121 magazines out there for you to find, split up into 17 different series to make organization a little bit easier and collection of them a little bit more hellish. And similar to the bobbleheads, the magazines also give you a stat boost upon collecting it. However, instead of it just being a flat out stat boost like with the bobbleheads, each magazine in a series you collect adds a level to a unique perk associated with said series. For example, say you collect all 10 Grognak the Barbarian comics. You unlock the fully upgraded Barbarian perk, which gives you a 1.5 critical damage multiplier when using melee weapons. Another way this can be done is seen with the Astoundingly Awesome Tales magazines, which give you 14 different perks depending on which magazine you collect, which can range from doing 5% more damage at night all the way to gaining +5 poison resistance and just about everything in between. However, to make my job even more annoying, not all magazines give you a stat boost. Instead, some hand out unique unlocks, such as the Hot Rodder series giving you new power armor paint, or my personal favorite being the Robco Fun series, which gives you access to new holotape minigames in each issue. Yeah, scratch that part, we're playing the minigames. I don't really know what you expected from this bit. Yeah, okay, that's enough of this self-imposed solitude. Time to go back to Preston and apologize for abandoning the Minutemen and... God, is he still talking about settlements? Wait a minute. What's the point of helping out these settlements anyway? Like, I mean, I know that story-wise it's about helping out the Minutemen rebuild, but like, what's the point of it when it comes to the gameplay? Well, the point is that Bethesda has created an entire settlement building system, and dadgummit, no matter how much Preston annoys me with his constant talk about it, I still love the settlement building system in this game. And if y'all are wondering where the majority of my Fallout 4 playtime came from, well, I mean, you're kind of looking at it. Whether you want to build a post-apocalyptic city, military fort, player home, something completely different, or all the above in the same place, the settlement system allows you to do it and make it look all exactly how you want it to. Well, more or less anyway. But hey, I can feel myself getting carried away already. So in an attempt to keep myself on track, let's shift our attention to all those wacky stats at the top of the screen that I hear you asking questions about. Either that or I'm just starting to hear voices in my head, which is just wonderful, so let's go with the latter, alright? Well, all those things are the settlement stats, which you need to manage in order to make an effective settlement. Beginning with food and water, because, I mean, they're the most self-explanatory. Yeah, you need crops and water sources in your settlement. Come on, it's not rocket science here, guys. Well, not yet anyway. Power is another pretty self-explanatory stat, given that if you craft anything that needs power, like lights or water purifiers, you need to wire them up to a generator. And I'll admit, when it comes to Fallout 4, I am a terrible electrician. I don't know why I said it like that. I'm also a terrible electrician in real life. Yeah, sorry about that one, Dad. The next category is defense, which can be covered by building turrets, traps, or guard posts to defend your settlements from attacks. Next is beds, which is pretty self-explanatory, so I won't really cover it. And finally is happiness, which I'm going to pretend to understand so that we can move on. Though I do know an exploit to get to 100%. That's right, I'm cool. Please like me. Alright, these stats are neat and all, but what's the purpose of them? Well, to encourage people to come and set up shop in your settlements, of course. Just plop down a recruitment beacon, somehow power it up, and settlers will begin flocking to your settlement. These settlers aren't just for show though, they're actually incredibly useful to have around your settlement. Why is this? Well, you can assign them the various roles in the settlement to help you out. Couple of examples, farmers help increase the food stat, but also actually grow the crop they're assigned to, which is really helpful, especially in survival mode. Guards not only increase the defense stat, but also patrol the settlement, and assuming you gave them the right outfit and weapon, look pretty freaking cool while doing so. Provisioners create supply lines between your settlements so that you always have access to your building supplies that you've acquired by hoarding all the junk you've collected, or in my case, all the junk that I've duplicated, because remember kids, not all glitches are bad. And finally, shopkeepers function as your own personal vendors who generate bottle caps for you, as well as selling a wide variety of goods due to the amount of buildable shops available. And if you want an even wider variety of goods to purchase, might I recommend recruiting a unique settler to run your shop? These settlers can be found around the map, sent to a settlement, and then assigned to a shop where they can begin selling unique items, including the occasional legendary item. Now, to those of you who are not familiar with Fallout 4, you may think that recruiting all the unique settlers would be pretty essential to ensuring you're effectively equipped for the journey ahead. But for the love of God, don't do that. Half these settlers are a pain to get, and the other half are beyond glitch, which just makes them near impossible to get. I mean, the only one which doesn't fall into one of these two categories is the Vault Tech rep, who I'm cool with, because in all honesty, he's by far the most intriguing of all the unique settlers. Flashing back to the beginning of the game, y'all remember that Vault Tech rep who was selling you a spot in Vault 111? Yeah, you can find him all ghoulified 200 years later in Goodneighbor and recruit him to your settlement as a unique settler. Like, that's just cool! Yeah, alright, I think that wraps up the explaining all the mechanics of the settlement system. Now it's time to discuss the actual locations where you can build a settlement. In total, there are 30 settlement locations which you can find all across the Commonwealth, and by either helping out the settlers already present at these locations, or clearing out whatever creatures inhabit it, you can claim it for yourself, or I suppose for the Minutemen, and begin building your masterpiece. Now keep in mind, these settlements vary quite a bit, including in size, location, vibe, and just a whole bunch more. Starting with size, Sanctuary Hills, the first settlement most players acquire because, I mean, look where it is the town you started the game in, and it doubles as one of the largest settlements as you get access to the entire town, which can lead to some really fun builds. Contrast that with Jamaica Plain, where you think you'll get access to the entire town as part of a settlement, just like Sanctuary, but yeah, no, logic isn't something that Fallout 4 knows. Next up, let's focus on the location of a settlement. Now, if there being 30 individual settlements to choose from, you really get quite a few choices on which settlement you like best for each region of the map. Well, unless you're in downtown Boston, then you only really get Hangman's Alley, which, over the course of several survival playthroughs, I've learned to really appreciate, but let's be honest, it isn't exactly a desirable settlement outside of its location. Shifting our attention over to the vibe of a settlement, and yeah, I'm just going to stop myself right there and say the castle, hands down, wins the vibe contest. I mean, come on, you're building up a 17th century star fort, Tres Italian if you're feeling pretentious, to make it a viable fortified headquarters for the Minutemen. That's just cool, man, come on! It also has some sick violin music playing throughout the fort, courtesy of Radio Freedom, which replaces Preston's constant yapping by telling you when a settlement needs your help over the airwaves. All in all, a pretty nice place. And finally, let's shift our attention to the much more category, starting with Covenant and Bunker Hill, both of which I completely forgot were settlements. Probably because they suck to build at and are pains to acquire. But enough with the formalities, let's just get straight to the point. Coastal Cottage is easily the worst settlement in all of Fallout 4. Like, who thought making this settlement was a good idea? Look at it! To begin, it isn't exactly a large settlement, but it isn't quite the smallest in the world, which doesn't sound that bad, But then you realize that the majority of the junk scattered around the yard is unscrappable, and the dilapidated house with the sinkhole is absolutely worthless. Alright, size doesn't matter all that much. Sometimes location can save a settlement, and... Alright, fine, screw you too, Todd Howard. Okay, vibe. If its location and size absolutely blow, maybe Coastal Cottage has an amazing vibe, right? And I mean, just looking at it, this view of the ocean's pretty cool. That might save the cell. Alright, that's it. Seriously, what the fuck? Huh, that was different. What next? Well, I mean, it has been a minute since we were actually looking for Sean, so we might as well get back to that. And what was that? Why is Preston following me? Well, since Radio Freedom is kind of doing his job for him, which is probably good given the whole thing that just went down, I actually discovered he's kind of a cool guy, so I decided to take him along with me while exploring as my companion. What's a companion, you say? Alright, I suppose I can neglect those parental duties for a bit longer. So, companions, a group of 13 characters which you can have keep you company while exploring the Commonwealth. There are various ways you can acquire these companions. Most of them, you have to get to a certain point in the main story or complete a side quest, but for a select few, you just kinda walk up to them and boom, you're best buds. Well, wait just a rootin' tootin' minute, you can become best buds with these companions? Well, to be completely honest, I said that more so to be funny, but whatever. That works as a way to talk about the affinity system, which is actually how you increase your friendship with companions and, depending on the companion, actually romance them. The system works by assigning activities which a companion likes or dislikes. For instance, if we take a look at Piper, the Diamond City newspaper reporter mentioned about 6 pages back, she'll like it if you're helpful to innocent civilians or pick unowned locks. However, she will dislike it when you steal and even hate it when you commit murder. If you do enough things that a companion likes, you'll become friends and have the ability to romance them, which is only available for around half of the companions. This is also around the point that on some companions, you will unlock a companion-exclusive quest, which are just straight up some of the best quests in the game, might I add. Looking at another example, this time Nick Valentine, the synth detective with the memories of a pre-war cop. Once getting his affinity nearly maxed out, you get the ability to help him track down the pre-war crime boss Eddie Winters, who murdered the pre-war Nick Valentine's fiancée prior to the Great War. Upon completing these quests or just maxing out affinity, you'll be given a companion perk which can range from alright to pretty much essential. Now yeah, this is all great and all, but let's throw that all out the window because Dogmeat is the one companion who completely ignores everything I just said and doesn't give 2 craps about how you behave. This also means that instead of giving you a traditional companion perk, Dogmeat's companion perk is actually found within the normal perk tree. But alright, I've already discussed about 23% of Fallout 4's companions, so I may as well go all the way and talk about the rest of them here briefly. Starting out the 4 faction companions, we have Deacon, who's a spy for the Railroad, Paladin Dance, a soldier in the Brotherhood of Steel, who's actually the person who brings us into the Brotherhood and serves as our commanding officer, Preston, which thank God Radio Freedom shut him up because he's actually a pretty chill dude with an incredibly overpowered perk, and X688, who's an Institute courser which hunts down runaway slaves, synths, and is by far the dullest companion in the entire game. Some other highlights include Codsworth, your pre-war Mr. Handy, who can actually say your character's name assuming it's contained within the 1200 names he can say, McCready, who is a morally ambiguous mercenary who called me some not nice names back in Fallout 3, Hancock, who is the ghoul drug addict mayor of Goodneighbor, Curie, a Miss Nanny scientist who can be found in Vault 81, Kate, a drug addict cage fighter who is, well, we'll say a little different, and then there's Strung, who's a super mutant and just straight up sucks. Like, this guy hates pretty much everything you would normally do in a playthrough. Basically, the only thing he actually likes is cannibalism, which I don't know where these raiders have been. I don't exactly think that's very sanitary. Like what if I get salmonella or something? Ew, gross. Now, despite me finding some of these companions less appealing compared to others, I must say that they're all pretty well written, and at a minimum, their character concepts are very interesting. But since their main goal is to help you explore the Commonwealth, I imagine you all want me to tell you about how I think each one of them does while doing so. Here you go. Yeah, this is running long. I don't need to repeat myself if I can help it. Okay, cool. That's done. I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about, so, I guess I should probably get around to finding Sean, eh? So, finally getting back to the main story, it looks like I left off with us murdering Kellogg and discovering that he handed Sean over to the Institute. Great. How the heck do we get Sean now? Well, if you said scoop out part of Kellogg's brain and delve into his memories, first off, you're a bit of a psycho if that's the first thing that popped into your head. And second, you'd be right! It's while we're inside Kellogg's memories that we discover two things. First is that the Institute uses teleportation to get around in secret, and second is that there's an escaped Institute scientist named Virgil hiding out in the glowing sea. Alright, so passing the crazies in the crater of Adam, we get to Virgil's cave, only to discover that he's turned into a super mutant. But don't worry, he's not the disembowel type, he's more of the Professor Hulk type. With a gun. Anyway, he helps us develop a plan on how to get into the Institute, which is located underneath the ruins of the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, CIT for short, which if you figured out that it bears a resemblance to the real-life MIT, good job! Expect a visit from the ghost of Fidel Castro in the next 10 to 20 business days. Okay, so, step 1 of the plan. Kill an Institute Courser to get a Courser chip.
I'm here to pick up an order. 2 large pepperoni and a calzone. Name is Fuck You.
I didn't see a handle with care sticker, so I think we're good. Step 2. Have the railroad decode the chip to figure out how the Institute's teleportation works. And finally, step 3. Build the teleporter, also called the molecular relay, with either the Minutemen, Railroad, or Brotherhood. And now, you have officially made it into the Institute. Woo! Also, Sean turns out to be an old man and the leader of the Institute. Well, that's a little different. Oh well, now that we've officially met all 4 factions, we now get to choose which faction we want to finish the game with. And decisions are annoying, so let's roll a dice and decide what faction dictates the fate of the wider metro area. Institute. Well, I mean, we're already here, so we might as well go along with what they want. And what they want is for us to capture some fugitive slaves, I mean escaped synths. We do this enough to gain Sean's trust, who now goes by Father due to his DNA being used in all synths, who then reveals to us that he's dying and wants us to take over the Institute for him. Dude, you know, you could have led with that. Fine, alright, will do. Anyway, then he asks us to go to Mass Fusion to collect the highly sought-after beryllium agitator, which can provide near limitless power for the Institute. So we do this, tick off the Brotherhood, take out the Railroad, because why not, and launch an all-out assault on the Brotherhood of Steel at the Boston airport, which ultimately downs the Pridwin and destroys the Brotherhood on the East Coast. And finally, we return to the Institute to have one last conversation with Sean before he dies, and we become the leader of the Institute. Alright then, well, that was a fairly interesting ending, if not a little needlessly evil. Let's try another one! The Brotherhood. Alright, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, we did just destroy them, so we may as well let them get revenge. So, let's rewind back to when we're getting teleported into the Institute. Elder Maxon, the leader of the Brotherhood, tells us to re-recruit an Institute scientist named Dr. Lee to their cause, and for a bit of context, she worked with the Brotherhood back in Fallout 3, but left the group in the 10 years which separates the games. Anyway, we convince Lee to return. Upon getting back to the airport, we're told that the Brotherhood is attempting to rebuild Liberty Prime, a giant freedom-loving robot who's destroyed, once again, back in Fallout 3. So alright, as we make the Brotherhood do most of the literal heavy lifting, they task us with getting some of the more fun bits of Liberty Prime working again. First of which being a refill for a backpack of nuclear footballs, which leads us back to the glowing sea. More specifically, Sentinel Site, where there are plenty of these just laying around. That might violate a couple guidelines, but I don't know. Our second step is completely unrelated to Liberty Prime, as we find out that Paladin Danse was unwittingly a synth the whole time, as Elder Maxon orders you to find and kill him, though it is up to you to decide what ultimately happens to him. And I just want to take a second to act like I've never interjected my own thoughts in the discussion right here, and say that this is by far one of the best quests in the entire game. No, scratch that. One of the best quests in the entire Fallout series. The raw emotion in this mission as you learn that your loyal companion was unknowingly the enemy the whole time just shows how well these games can be written, and it really tests the Brotherhood ideology of believing that the synths are mechanical abominations, even if said abomination has fought and bled for that same ideology. If only the rest of the game was written that well. Anyway, on to step 3, destroy the railroad. Why? Well, I mean, they're right there, so, why not? Step 4, acquire the beryllium agitator, the Power Liberty Prime, which ticks off the Institute. Step 5, bask in the glory of democracy as Liberty Prime takes the fight to the Institute. Anyway, via Liberty Prime being basically the embodiment of the military-industrial complex, we enter the Institute, fight through waves of synths, plant a bomb on the Institute's reactor, and proceed to blow it sky high as we rid the Commonwealth of its mysterious boogeyman. Okay, well that ending was certainly action-packed and all around a personal favorite. What faction should we do next? The Railroad. I mean, we have completely eradicated them twice already, they may as well get a shot at redemption. So once again, rewinding back to when we teleport into the Institute, we are told by the Railroad's leader, Desdemona, that we need to make contact with a mysterious man within the Institute, going by the name Patriot, who has been secretly smuggling synths out into the Commonwealth. And upon meeting with the synths that Patriot is working with, we start plotting a synth uprising. But don't go thinking you're some post-apocalyptic John Brown quite yet, because you have to go through pretty much the entire Institute ending again before you get to do the Railroad ending. God, I hate that gameplay decision. It's so dumb. But alright, we do that. The Brotherhood hits the Railroad HQ underneath the Old North Church, so we hit them back even harder. And now, it's time to be the post-apocalyptic John Brown that we've always wanted to be by setting off a synth uprising. However, unlike John Brown, we're actually successful in this endeavor as we plant a bomb on the Institute's reactor and blow out the Kingdom Come. Okay, that ending was kind of dumb and not that well written, if I'm being honest with you guys here. But alright, 3 factions down, the Revolutionary War cosplayers left to go. So again, going back to getting teleported into the Institute, we conduct some, we'll say, high-tension negotiations with a surprisingly easy escape tacked onto the end, which leads to the Institute attacking the castle. Hope you built up those defenses because, oh my god, this is quite the onslaught. Anyway, with piles of dead synths and coursers at the castle, we crawl through the sewers until we get into the Institute, and, as usual, we plant a bomb on the reactor and blow it up. You know, I'm starting to sense a pattern here. 3 of the 4 endings end exactly the same way, like, even the same concluding cutscene is played. The only wholly unique ending is with the Institute, which, if I'm being honest, is not my favorite one. And while we're on the topic of wholly unique, we only really have the Institute and the Brotherhood, because the Railroad just uses the majority of the Institute's questline, and the Minutemen, well, I wouldn't call shooting your son in the face unique. Just kinda lazy. But hey, either way, our journey was a success as we did find out what happened to Sean, and top that off with a nice sprinkling of deciding the fate of the entire Commonwealth. So, what now? Well, we get into the DLC, of course. Released between March and August of 2016, we got 1 DLC per month, totaling up to 6 DLCs. Well, unless you count the high-resolution texture pack, which is technically a DLC, but didn't release until 2017. If I remember right, it ticked off the community to such an extent where nobody talks about it. So, just like the good little follower that I am, that's exactly what I'll do as well. So, how are these 6 DLCs? Well, to be honest, kind of a mixed bag, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's begin covering Fault Force DLC in order of release. And to begin, we have Automatron, which centers around robots invading the Commonwealth, led by a mysterious comic book supervillain, the Mechanist. So, it's our job to take down the Mechanist with the help of our new robot companion, Ada. Yeah, we'll just put her up on the tier list here while we're at it. Anyway, the DLC ends when we confront the Mechanist in their lair, only for us to win the confrontation and for her to confess that she hadn't programmed the robots to hurt humans and the whole thing had been just one giant big misunderstanding. But those robots are still brutally murdering people, so we should probably take care of that. Now, even looking past my brutal butchering of it, Automatron's story is not exactly what I'd label as peak storytelling, but it gets the job done. Now that is absolutely due to the DLC's runtime, standing at a measly 3.5 hours. So none of the few ideas that it introduces really have time to develop, but I don't really think Bethesda cared about story when it came to this DLC, because they just really cared about building robots, and I mean, hey, that's cool, so I kinda dig it. So upon starting the DLC, we get access to the Robot Workbench, which allows us to build new robots or modify existing ones like Ada or even Codsworth. Oh yeah, bro, I think you're ready for the catwalk. We get all kinds of weapons and parts to put on our robot buddies, including more makeshift parts, courtesy of the new enemies introduced in this DLC being the Rust Devils. Alright, I think that covers the main parts of Automatron. What didn't I cover that I could shove into a little lightning around here? Well, the DLC adds in some new robot-themed weapons, some Tesla power armor, a new settlement located in the Mechanist lair which blows. Yeah, I think that covers it all. On to the next DLC, which happens to be Wasteland Workshop. Oh my god, this DLC is a hot mess. Focusing solely on the settlement system of Fallout 4, Wasteland Workshop adds in an eclectic collection of random settlement items that really have no rhyme or reason, being in the same package as each other. We have some decorations in here, a concrete structure pack, a bunch of new traps, a whole combat arena thing, a bunch of cages which can trap enemies and animals with the ability to tame the latter, and just a bunch of random things that I'm probably forgetting. And although some of the things like the fusion generator and powered water pump are so awesome to the point where I can't picture playing Fallout 4 without them anymore, there's just so much junk in this DLC that makes me question why this wasn't a free update and was a $5 DLC instead. But alright, enough with that. What do we have next? Now we're getting somewhere. So, Far Harbor, Fallout 4's first story DLC, well only if we ignore Automatron, which we probably should, as well as Fallout 4's largest DLC. Starting out as a simple alert from the Valentine Detective Agency, we are tasked with helping Nick with a missing persons case at the Nakano residence along the northeastern coast of the Commonwealth. And getting there, we learn that the Nakano's daughter, Kasumi, is missing, and by doing some detective work, we find that she believes that she's a synth, which led her to leave the Commonwealth in search of a synth refuge of Acadia, located on Mount Desert Island off the coast of Maine. Cool, looks like Mr. Parmesan gets to go to Maine, eh? Well, not quite. See, Mr. Parmesan's on sick leave, so to fill this vacancy while he recovers, his cousin Anthony Mozzarella will be taking up this adventure. Yes, this is just me being lazy and using an old survival mode save file. Shut up! Anyway, upon reaching the island, we learn that not only is the entire place covered in radioactive fog, which instantly elevates the vibe to triple digits of atmosphere, but we also learn that a conflict is brewing between the factions present on the island. On one side, we have the town of Far Harbor, who's made up of a bunch of fishermen desperately trying to fight back the fog and the mutants present on the island. Far Harbor is opposed by the Children of Adam, yeah, that weird radiation cult from the Glowing Sea, who have set up shop in an old nuclear submarine base, and in true radiation cult fashion, they view the fog as Adam's desire to make the island a holy site for his followers. And finally, wedged in the middle of the Far Harbor Children of Adam tension is the synth refuge of Acadia, who just wants to save as many lives as possible, both human and synth. Well, and humans who think they're synths in the case of Kasumi. But of course, talking to Kasumi, she doesn't want to leave because she feels that she's stumbled into something big which could tip the scales in the brewing conflict. And at the center of it is Dima. Who's Dima? Well, he's the prototype synth who leads Acadia, which is pretty cool in and of itself because, I mean, just look at him. But if you have Nick Valentine tag along with you during the DLC, we learn that Dima is actually Nick's long-lost brother, and the entire reason Nick escaped the Institute. And I knew I loved the companions in Fallout 4, and this entire storyline here just reinforces that, because you would have completely missed it if you didn't bring Nick along with you. Anyway, after some, we'll say investigating, we're directed to the aforementioned subbase to collect some of Dima's memories off the central computer. Is this what Vietnam flashbacks feel like? Dude, I can't even think of words to describe this mission because, oh my god, this thing is just terrible. Like seriously, who thought to create a bad tower defense minigame, but then lock it behind an even worse puzzle section? And this isn't even just an optional side quest. No, there are 5 levels to this crap, and 3 of them are mandatory to unlock the endings of Far Harbor, which I would much rather talk about. So let's shift our focus over to that and leave this steaming pile of horse crap to think about its actions, alright? Well, despite there being an ending to destroy each of the factions on the island, either by shutting off the power to Far Harbor using the wind farm kill switch code, detonating a nuke in the sub-base using the nuclear launch code key, or just shooting up Acadia with Far Harbor, in my mind, the true ending to Far Harbor is the one where peace is restored on the island. To do this, we must go full Institute and replace the zealous leader of the Children of Adam, High Confessor Tectus, with a synth who will pacify the group. Don't fret, we don't need to replace the leader of Far Harbor. Dima already did that before we got here. So anyway, we murder Tectus, stuff him in a wall, replace him, return Kasumi to her parents in the Commonwealth, and then the island lives happily ever after. Well, not quite happily. I mean, there is still fog and monsters to deal with, but who really wants to go out and explore the interior of the island, right? Oh yeah. So, what all does this fog-entombed island have in store for us? Well, let's begin with the neat locations that Far Harbor has on offer. First up, we have a giant factory producing Vim, the local competitor to Nuka-Cola, which also features a story of pre-war corporate espionage, a set of Vim-themed power armor, as well as a super mutant behemoth named Grun in the basement. You know, maybe it was because I was a stupid little kid when this DLC came out, but I remember Grun being a lot harder to kill back in the day. We also have a bowling alley featuring an emotional story about a group of bowling buddies before the bombs fell, and of course what we all care about, a modified Fat Man which shoots bowling balls. There's also Vault 118, located underneath the Cliff's Edge Hotel, which was built to house a bunch of celebrities who have all turned themselves into robots by the time that we enter the vault to solve a murder mystery. Which, might I add, this is a really fun side quest. And speaking of side quests, there are plenty of them here in this DLC, as all three factions have plenty of side quests to hand out. But if I'm gonna be honest with you guys here, Far Harbor has the best side quests out of the three factions, because I mean, come on, this is how you unlock all the settlements of the DLC, and it maybe has one of my favorite lines of dialogue after you track down the big bad scary monster, the Red Death.
Think we can handle it? We could always call in the Marines.
Man, that's all you don't need it again. And make your exhale from the nose. Good job there, Sonny.
Alright, that's really all I got for that, so I guess let's just hit up everything that I haven't mentioned yet in Far Harbor in a good old-fashioned not quite lightning round, right? The Islander's Almanac, a new set of 5 magazines, were introduced in Far Harbor and give you 5 separate perks, because of course they do. A new companion was introduced in the form of Old Longfellow, who's the definition of a mid-companion all the way around. Once again, screw the Dima's Memories mission. Yep, I think that about covers it. Back to you, Mr. Parmesan. Bye, Mr. Mozzarella. So alright, we now have one absolutely legendary DLC under our belts, following up 2 kinda mediocre DLCs. Was this a sign that Bethesda was turning things around and going to make something that was actually up to the quality of Far Harbor? No. Instead, we got Contraptions Workshop, which is similar to Wasteland Workshop, but most of the items at least fit into a theme. Revolving mostly around, well, contraptions, we get new electrical gizmos, which I'm not going to pretend to understand, as this may as well be rocket science. Elevators and the warehouse structure set, which are more things that I can't imagine not having while playing Fallout 4, as well as manufacturing plants. So, you know, if you ever wanted to establish your own post-apocalyptic macaroni and cheese cartel, I'm not even going to finish that statement, I already know the answer. Contraptions Workshop also added in display stands for weapons, armor, and power armor, which, if this was the only thing this DLC added in, I would still be genuinely happy, because, I mean, come on, that's just so cool. But alright, now that we got another settlement DLC out of the way, if the pattern holds, we should be getting another story DLC, right? Alright, I guess I have one more settlement DLC in me. So, Vault-Tec Workshop, the 3rd settlement DLC of Fallout 4. However, unlike the last 2, this one actually gives an in-game reason why you suddenly get access to all this new stuff. See, you can now tune into a distress call from the Overseer of Vault 88, and upon clearing the entrance of raiders and ghouls, we find the unfinished husk of the vault, as well as the ghoulified Overseer, who tasks us with finishing up the vault and conducting experiments on vault residents. These experiments include an exercise bike which produces power, a pop machine, how do I, Phoropter? That torturous eye machine that doctors have, as well as a slot machine. Now see, it's up to you how benevolent or malevolent you want these experiments to be, but in all honesty, it doesn't really matter what you do because either way you become the overseer of the vault. Well, that's nice and all, but what else does DLC add? Well, I mean, it adds in a bunch of new vault-related decorations, furniture, and other things, as well as a massive new settlement, which as you build up the vault, you can expand by exploring newly unlocked areas and clearing out the enemies present there. Yep, I think that's about it. But hey, at least we got a nice little story with Vault Tech Workshop, which gives some context on why we all of a sudden have access to these items. That is certainly something that Contraptions and Wasteland Workshop could have used. But alright, enough about that. What do we have next? Alright, now we're talking. Sorry, Mr. Parmesan, you're being left behind. How's it going, Mr. Mozzarella? So, Nuka World. Fallout 4's final and by far hardest DLC. Like, for God's sake, the bloody ants will rip you a new one if you're not careful. Anyway, we uncover a pre-war broadcast advertising Nuka World, a theme park dedicated to everything Nuka-Cola related, which leads us to the Nuka World Transit Station, where you find a man who, after some persuasion, tells us that Nuka World has been taken over by raiders, and he's here to lure unsuspecting individuals into the park that the raiders can torture. Naturally, we ignore this warning, and like the adrenaline junkie that we are, we hop on the monorail bound for Nuka World. Getting there, we carefully navigate the torture maze that the raiders call the Gauntlet until we reach the Cola Cars Arena, where we're challenged to a fight by Overboss Coulter, the leader of the 3 raider gangs that inhabit Nuka World, who has rigged the fight in his favor with his invincible power armor. Now, this might sound like an impossible fight, but don't fret. With the help of Coulter's right-hand man and cutting-edge modern weaponry, we disable Coulter's armor and shoot him in the face enough until gravity takes the wheel. Congratulations! You're now the new overboss in Nuka World, with now your right-hand man, Porter Gage, giving you a brief introduction of the situation you find yourself plopped in the middle of. Which, might I say, is a perfect opportunity to give you all some context on what's going on. Personally, I prefer the term creative over lazy, but, whatever, minor details. So, the 3 gangs in Nuka World consist of the Operators, which are your more professional Hitman-esque gang, the Pack, which are essentially a what-if furries knew what a gun was, and the Disciples, which are your basic edgy people whose entire personality is that they love violence. So essentially, if pre-Adpocalypse YouTube was made into a raider gang. Now, these 3 raider gangs have been sitting around for a couple of years, hoping to take over all 6 zones in Nuka World. However, Coulter put a lid on that multiple times. Though, with Coulter being... The gangs want your help in capturing the remainder of the park. To do this, we must go to every park, solve a problem of some sort, and then designate one of the 3 gangs as the owner of that zone. Got it all? No? Too bad! Time to go! But don't worry, Porter Gage is coming with you, as he is the new companion that Nuka World introduces, and, he's fine to have around with you while exploring. Alright, 6 zones, eh? What do they all have on offer for us? Well, to begin, we have Nuka Town, USA, which if we compare it to Disney World for a second, because let's be honest, that's what Nuka World is based on, it's essentially just Main Street, USA, and it's already under the control of the Raiders, so no need to worry about that one. Okay, so our first real zone is Galactic Zone, which is the space zone with a space roller coaster and extraterrestrial vault exhibit. Your goal here is to take out the hostile robots and collect enough star cores to reboot the zone's mainframe. But if you happen to collect all the cores, you get a unique set of power armor. Ooh, pretty. Next up is Kitty Kingdom, which sees you combating a ghoul magician who is trying to save his co-workers who have all since turned feral. Overall, it's a fairly basic zone with a Kitty Kingdom theme. I mean, what'd you expect? Our third zone is Dry Rot Gulch, where we live out our cowboy fantasy by doing cowpuncher things, drinking pop, and murdering bloodworms in Man! Next up is the Nuka-Cola bottling plant, which sounds boring, but we do get an old mill-style ride on a river of Nuka-Cola Quantum, so hey, that's cool. And now, onto our final zone of Nuka World, Safari Adventure, which has been infested with nasty gator claws, which have a tendency to scare the ever-living daylights out of you. But don't fret, as long as you assert your mammalian dominance, you should be A-okay. And that's all of Nuka World captured. Alright, now what? Well, I guess we could take a gander at some side quests. So, what do the people of Nuka World want? Well, we already took care of some of the issues that the Raiders want us to fix around here, so let's see what non-Raider issues there are around here. Well, to begin, there's a cult called the Hebologists squatting out the local truck stop who want our help in gaining access to a UFO right in the junkyard. So you help them get there and power it up, though if you're feeling a little naughty, you can overpower the ride and blow everyone's heads off. And no, I'm not showing the ride in motion. Not because of graphic content or anything, because please, why would I start censoring stuff now? I don't want to make myself motion sick again. Yeah, you're welcome. We also have everyone's favorite Nuka-Cola fiend, Fallout 3 Sierra Petrovita, who wants us to find 10 hidden pictures of Cappy, who's one of the 2 Nuka World mascots alongside Bottle. Now see, these 10 hidden pictures are part of a pre-war contest which allows the winners to meet the inventor of Nuka-Cola himself, John Caleb Bradburton. Now you might think that given that this was a pre-war contest, there's no way that we're able to meet Bradburton nowadays. But hey, you'd be wrong because he Walt Disney'd himself and his frozen head is located underneath the park. So anyway, we assist in Bradburton's suicide and we get some cool stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah, we also have the Grantchester Mystery Mansion, which is just haunted by the ghost of a dead little girl. Oh my god, when did Fallout 4 get so dark? Oh yeah, that's right. Well then, yeah, I think that's enough exploring for one day. You want to go back to the Commonwealth? Yeah? Cool, because the Raiders had the same exact ideas. You're now being tasked with setting up Raider outposts throughout the Commonwealth at all those settlements that we discussed a while back. Now, despite these outposts reusing the settlements of the Commonwealth, they do actually change up the settlement system quite a bit, because unlike normal settlements, Raider outposts don't actually like to do work. Therefore, you need to recruit the surrounding settlements to supply them with food, which, yeah, none of this exactly makes the Minutemen, specifically Preston, happy in the slightest. But who cares about that? A crisis is brewing in Nuka World. The gang that you gave the least amount of territory to is rebelling. What gang is that, you might ask? The Disciples are the only correct answer. Stop lying to yourself. So anyway, we go to the Nuka World power plant, murder all the Disciples there, turn on the power, and boom, that's Nuka World for you. Is there anything I forgot to mention? You can mix your own Nuka-Cola variants now. You get a Nuka World Red Rocket settlement, which is, it's fine. There's a new set of 5 magazines. The Nuka-Cade. Yeah, I think that about covers it. Back to you, Mr. Parmesan, who gets the unfortunate task of dealing with the consequences of our actions. Wait a minute, how long have I been gone? Oh yeah, we still need to talk about mods, that makes sense. So, Fallout and modding, 2 words that fit together naturally, kind of like the place that invented the computer and barely functional Wi-Fi. Well, that's an oddly specific example. And with mods being such an iconic part of the series, Bethesda naturally wanted a way to cash in. Enter Creation Club, Bethesda's marketplace for paid mods. Which are kinda canon to the world, but also kinda not at the same time, with some of them being really neat and others being 50-cent paint jobs. Now, is this an incredibly dumb and greedy system? Yes. Are the mods completely overpriced? Also yes. Can you get a lot of the content for free if you wait long enough? Do I still enjoy the content being peddled on the service? I mean, yeah. So let's take a look at a few of them, such as our brand new minimum wage job. The Slocum's Joe Settlement Pack is exactly what it sounds like, a collection of settlement objects and crafting stations themed around Fallout's version of Dunkin' Donuts. Which, might I say, as a person who visited Boston once in like 2018, yeah, that fits pretty well. Next up, I want to shift our attention to a more miscellaneous creation, that being the modular military backpack. Now, why am I singling out this fairly simple mod? I mean, there's no quest or anything to acquire it, as it just spawns in your inventory the second you leave the vault. Well, the real reason I bring it up is the same reason that I brought up Hangman's Alley like 11 pages ago. That being survival mode. The fact that your carrying capacity is greatly reduced in survival mode, having an armor piece that increases that carrying capacity while looking cool is absolutely essential. And it's highly customizable, so it can fit basically any playstyle imaginable. What's not to love? Though, circling back to me mentioning how you acquire the backpack, I said,
I mean, there's no quest or anything to acquire it, as it just spawns in your inventory the second you leave the vault.
And to clear up any confusion, yes, Creation Club does have full-fledged quest mods in there. Quest mods. Singular quests. Fairly basic and underwhelming quests in all honesty, but I mean, hey, at least you get something unique at the end of them all. Though, if you're looking for a more substantial singular quest, look no further than the free creations provided in the next-gen update of the game, and to be honest, I think these are probably my favorite thing to come out of Creation Club. And not only because they're completely free to those on PS5, Xbox Series consoles, and PC, but they are also probably the best written out of all of the Creation Club content, feature the most entertaining items, and are all semi-canon to the Fallout universe. Well, I mean, I guess that does go for everything in Creation Club, but it's a weird gray area. Completely shifting gears, Bethesda isn't the only one producing mods for their game, thankfully, because Fallout 4 has quite possibly one of the most active community modding scenes in gaming, only really rivaled by games such as Skyrim and Minecraft. And with such an active modding community dating all the way back to 2015, there is absolutely no conceivable way that I will be able to mention all the mods I've enjoyed over the years. Well, that and also the fact that I haven't played Mod Fallout 4 since like 2020, so I have completely forgotten a great deal of mods I used to adore. Well, I guess it's time for me to go over to the Nexus Mods webpage and see what mods I can uncover, eh?
What's going on, everyone? It's Michael from Chip Chicken Gaming, and today we're on Nexus Mods to talk about some highlights of Fallout 4 modding from back in the day. Now, see, let's start out with Sim Settlements here. Don't mind the ads here. But, Sim Settlements, great if you don't really want to interact with the settlement system, but still want a great settlement. Put those settlers to work. If they don't get paid, just don't call it slavery and you're good. Second up, we have Scrap Everything. There's a bunch of junk lying around these settlements around the world. Post-apocalypse, everything got blown to Kingdom Come. So, it's great to have some mods and abilities to scrap everything. Though, beware, you can scrap entire houses and leave crap floating around like you're seeing here. So, just be careful of that. Next, Cheat Terminal. Morals don't really matter if you just have unlimited ammo. I'm just saying. Next up is the Lee Enfield weapon mod. Great historical weapon used by the British military through both world wars, used by some countries into the modern day. But, if you ever really want to use this to do some post-apocalyptic colonization, great way to roleplay. Next up is OC Decorator. Again, great mod if you want to decorate, if you are really into the settlement building system, if you really just want to scatter a bunch of beer bottles around your settlement to pretend that, there's a deadbeat dad hanging around, you can do that, and the beer bottles won't fall over. So, a great system there. And then for our final mod, we have... Oh.
Yeah, I think this is a sign that I need to go touch grass more often. So much for that plan. Oh boy, that ran long. We probably ought to start thinking about wrapping this up. So anyway, at the end of the day, Fallout 4 sold around 25 million copies, which, holy crap, dwarfs every other game in the series, as well as making it the third best-selling game of 2015. Which sounds unimpressive, but 2015 was just one of those years that was filled with generation-defining games. So third is not bad in the slightest. And for God's sake, the game was even nominated for Game of the Year that year. But shifting our focus back to the Fallout series as a whole, the only game close to beating Fallout 4's record is... Into the Fire it is, I guess. So, was Fallout 76 a good game when it launched back in 2018? No. As a matter of fact, it was actually quite terrible. But is 76 a good game nowadays? Now you see that right there is a drastically different answer. Pretty much everything wrong with the game at launch has since been fixed. The game is actually pretty stable, the open world isn't empty anymore, and there are actually non-hostile human NPCs. Yeah, that's right, take that back of the box. Though, the main question I often ask myself is if Fallout 76 is a worthy successor to Fallout 4. And my non-legally binding answer to that question is, kinda. In my eyes, 76 improves on some aspects of Fallout 4, such as with the weapon selection, the return of armor and weapon degradation, as well as the settlement system being replaced with the camp system. Though in other areas, I feel that 76 comes up rather short of Fallout 4, such as with storytelling, the open world of Appalachia, and the main quest. Though that is cheating a little bit, given that the game launched with basically an audiobook for a main story. Either way, despite my criticism of 76, especially regarding its launch, it's still a really enjoyable game, and probably the closest we'll ever get to multiplayer Fallout 4. Though one of the aspects which I must commend 76 on is that it carries some of the best parts of Fallout 4 into the modern day, which personally I really love. Though others don't think the same way, which gets us into... Now don't get me wrong, most of the Fallout community are genuinely awesome people who just love the Fallout franchise, which I totally respect. But oh my god, there is this vocal minority who will do anything in their power to drag down this game's legacy to prove their point. Now, is Fallout 4 a perfect game? God no, of course it's not. Even I can see that with my rose-tinted glasses.
These are clear.
I mean, come on, the game is incredibly unstable and really glitchy even after a decade. The story suffers from pacing issues and characters having really dumb motives. The Brotherhood is really the only faction in the game that is written with any nuance or logic. The game is rather linear and filled with plenty of missed opportunities. Coastal Cottage exists. The main character being voiced limits dialogue options as well as making role-playing harder. Half the DLC only appeals to those who enjoy the settlement mode. And most importantly, that god-awful Dima's memory mission actually made it into the game. Now, do all these make Fallout 4 a bad game? No, of course not. Flawed? Sure, but not bad. But when you try and make that point to anyone in this portion of the community, the response you typically get is something along the lines of,
Fallout New Vegas is the best game of all time.
and that right there is the issue. The utter glazing that New Vegas receives. Yeah, I am far too old to be saying that. Now, don't take this as me hating on New Vegas. Despite its own serious issues such as lots of wasted world space, lackluster combat, as well as it being extremely broken, something I experienced the full might of back on the PS3, I'd still say it's an amazing game, and looking at it objectively, it's a lot better than Fallout 4 in some areas. But just because you perceive New Vegas, or any other game for that matter, as better than another, that doesn't mean that you should ignore all the flaws in your own favorite game and fail to mention the highlights of said game you're criticizing. Now yes, this might sound kinda hypocritical coming from the guy who won't shut up about his hatred of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but a detailed discussion of that game is a topic for, never, so it's probably just best to drop it. And this cake does taste pretty good. So I guess what I'm trying to say with all this is just because Fallout 4 isn't Fallout New Vegas doesn't mean it isn't a good game in its own right. Every game has flaws and we need to do our best to not ignore those, even if it is our favorite game. And you know what? Despite its multitude of serious issues, I still think Fallout 4 is a masterpiece, and quite frankly, I am tired of pretending that it's not one.
Huh. I guess a great game gets produced in that situation. You know? Kinda cool with that, personally. Let's threaten another city. How about, oh, I see. Let's threaten... Yellow. Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, I didn't know that, sorry. You know, I will refrain from doing that in the future. Thank you for letting me know. Alright, bye-bye. So apparently it's illegal to threaten a city with thermonuclear Armageddon according to the ICC. Well, my weekend fun. Screw you guys. God.
Oh boy, that ran a little long, didn't it? And to think I started production back in May of 25. In all honesty though, thank you guys so much for watching through this video, or at least having the decency to skip to the end, because this project here has been very special to me over the last couple months. Not just because it's a discussion on my favorite game of all time, but because of the upload date being January 23rd of 2026, meaning that Chip Chicken Gaming has been around for an entire decade now. I feel like there's no better way to celebrate this anniversary than by doing a big old review over the game I've been rambling about for the past decade. So, hope you all enjoyed, and as the old saying goes, have a wonderful day and a wonderful life. Peace out.